Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. And we're here today with another game discussion. I want to talk about survival games because, they're everywhere, and people are constantly asking me, as of lately, about my thoughts on H1Z1. So I thought this was a very good time to sort of explain a little bit further about what I really would like to see in a survival game and why I just simply don't care about H1Z1. Why, to me, it is just another zombie survival game that doesn't really use the word survival as strongly as it probably should. So there's been a lot of streams for that game, and I've watched them all. It's a game that I'm interested. Maybe they'll do something that I have been waiting for these survival type games to do, but at the end of the day, it's just, okay, it's a zombie survival game. And I think a lot of people are simply excited because it aims to provide what DayZ already is providing, but in a more polished, a seemingly more polished experience. The fact is, it's going to launch in alpha on early access on Steam, and it'll probably be just as broken as DayZ is. So I don't see any hope or faith there, and I'm not going to throw all of my money at the screen, so to speak, when that goes into early access just to get my hands on it. So for me, there's nothing there. It's another zombie survival game, and if it's really polished and well done, that's not enough for me to care. That's great. Cool. Hopefully the zombies will actually kill people. Maybe that'll make things a little bit more interesting, but it still isn't what I'm looking for. Now, I don't have a problem with survival games that have zombies or monsters in them. That's fine, and I think it's perfectly fine to have a zombie survival game or a survival horror game like The Forest with monsters. But I think that those elements, those zombies and monsters and creatures and aliens and whatever you may have it, other players, even in the case of DayZ for the PvP, are often used to replace a missing layer in the survival terminology for survival games. This missing set of elements that could truly enhance the gameplay experience for these survival games. It's so obvious, it seems to me. It's something a lot of people, I think about when they play DayZ, especially because a lot of these ideas that I'm going to name here are something that DayZ has talked about, Dean Hall has talked about, and that maybe one day we will actually see inside of DayZ. But I think more people enjoy running around for 4 or 5 hours, shooting someone in the face with a rifle at the end of that 4 or 5 hours, and then calling it a day. To me, that's not really fun. But some people might actually think that that is extremely enjoyable, in which case would explain why DayZ is so successful already at this point. But that layer of elements that I'm talking about is everything else that has to happen when you look at, okay, the world just came to an end, solar flare hit the earth, EMP'd everything, zombies, zombie apocalypse, end of the world, monsters, I crashed in a plane in the middle of the forest, I have to survive. What are the first set of things that you have to do? Those games usually force you to do those things. They say you need to find food, you need to find water. The issue is that you're not punished enough for failing to do those things. Doing those things isn't difficult enough, and at the same time, there's that one other element that should be fighting against you that entire time while you're fighting off the monsters, while you're trying to find food, and that is the weather. That is the world around you. Not just in a place that's cold, but a place that's warm. Rain at night. Most places where it can rain, it becomes rather cold at night, unless you're talking about like the rainforest, in which case it's just always hot. But even that is of concern. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Serious concerns from a survival standpoint. And a lot of people might say, well, you're nitpicking, why should those elements exist in those games? But they would improve the experience, so why shouldn't they? Plus, why are you going to claim to call your game a survival experience if you remove an entire set of elements that are all about surviving? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I can only think about how much more enjoyable something like DayZ would be if I was punished more extremely for doing stupid things, like running out in the middle of the night in the rain with nothing but a hoodie and jeans on and getting soaking wet for 2.5 hours. Hypothermia, anyone? It's probably freezing. If it's the middle of the night and it's raining, it's probably around 40 degrees in a place like, fictional Russia, Chernigorsk, Chernobyl over there. You just wouldn't do that. You would stay inside. Even if you didn't have fire, being inside that house is going to be a hell of a lot warmer than going outside and becoming soaked and then running around, it's just break out a sweat in the middle of the night, covered in water, clothes are soaked, and it's pouring outside. I want to be punished for those stupid decisions if I choose to make them, or at least have to tackle those situations more delicately. Say, well, at least we're in a city, and this city's huge, and we just got here, it's dark, it's pouring outside, we'll go house to house, we'll stop, we'll take breaths, and, we'll find whatever clothes we can just to sort of throw them over our body to stay dry, so we can try and find the needed medical supplies we need, because my rib cage was slashed open by a zombie, and I need to like actually take care of this wound. It's great that I threw a bandage around it, but I need to clean it. I need to do other things to it. And again, a lot of people are going to say, well, you're taking it too far, but am I really? Or is that actually the survival experience that these games should be should be creating, the ones that they're claiming to make? Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not telling anyone how they should play a survival game, how they should create a survival game, how they should enjoy a survival game, or what survival type games they should play. I'm merely stating an opinion that I think would provide these survival games with a much more interesting experience for the player. DayZ right now is a lot of walking. It's just a lot of walking. That's what you do. You walk a bunch. Because food, water, warmth, clothing, all of those things have been made so trivial by the fact that you're not punished for a lack of them quickly enough. Now, in DayZ, you might eventually die of hunger after 8 hours of in-game playtime, but that's too much time. Why should I be allowed to walk around for 8 hours without any food? Better yet, why should I be allowed to sprint around with a backpack full of gear for 8 hours with no food before I die? Why am I not being affected by a lack of calories? Calories are energy. They're what makes the body able to function to do extraneous activities. And when you run low on them, you should be punished for that. You should barely be able to walk, let alone carry around a backpack full of stuff. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, all these things are planned for DayZ in the future. And that's cool. I hope it gets there. But when you look at survival games as a whole, the things I'm talking about are missing. They're blatantly missing from these experiences, and I think it's a mistake, because I think they're simply gameplay enhancers. I think we're at that point now where people would enjoy these things in DayZ. They would enjoy these things in the forest, and in the H1Z1 even. These are elements that would just make the game better. Now again, that's purely my opinion. Some people might disagree and say, I don't want to have to deal with all that tedious nonsense, but I mean, is being really concerned that you were just slashed open by a zombie and that it's pouring and raining outside and it's 40 degrees, is that any more tedious than endlessly sprinting around a 40-kilometer map just picking things up from houses until you finally are shot or killed by another player? Which one is more tedious? Because I find one to be far less tedious and in many ways just actually more enjoyable, more intense, more interesting, and the other one to be just the definition of tedious in many ways. Now, there's a game that I want to talk about before I end all this, and before I go ahead and talk about this game, I want to ask you guys, of course, to go ahead and let me know your thoughts on survival, the current state of survival games in the comment section below. What elements would you like to see in the survival games that already exist, or perhaps in your favorite survival game? I enjoy DayZ. I spend a lot of time playing it. It's why I can make these reference points to the game, because I hope that one day it'll get to that point. Dean Hall talked a lot about these survival elements, and I would really like to see them eventually be a huge portion of DayZ. And I think that would just enhance the PvP aspect. It would enhance the zombies, Having to be so concerned about all of this, and then realizing that there's a firefight going on inside a Cherno and you really need medical supplies. It would just heighten that experience. It would take it to a new level of intensity. So let me know your thoughts. What would you like to see? What elements would you like to see that are missing from most modern survival games? What would you like to see implemented into those games? What would make the experience something that you would be far more interested in playing? Now, I want to talk about a game called The Long Dark, because I just want to get it out there. I feel a lot of people don't actually know about this game. And that kind of makes me sad, because it looks very promising in terms of creating a true attempt at a survival experience, one that, punishes the player for ignoring the elements in the world around them and how those things will actually affect them. So it's called The Long Dark. It's being developed by Hinterland Studios. Basically, background story behind it, single player. It's going to have a sandbox mode and a story mode with voice acting and moral decision making that will affect, the outcome of your player's life, essentially. You play a pilot who crashes in the Great North after a solar flare hits the Earth and essentially EMPs everything, destroys everything. Now, Scott Manley, he backed the game as an alpha backer back in last year, I believe. If you backed it for $80, you got access to the alpha build that will be available to everyone else come to September on Steam. This is just the sandbox portion of it. He did a Let's Play of it. I'll have it linked in the description below. Go check it out. It showcases exactly what I'm talking about and some of the really intelligent design decisions that Hinterland has made with The Long Dark. that are all about just making it a constantly enjoyable gameplay experience. There's not really any lulls because you're always trying to survive. The weather is always going against you. Lack of food and resources is always going against you. And they sort of scale things. So rather than looking at the game like most people might say, like, oh, the human body can go 4 weeks without food or whatever, they say, okay, well, we're going to scale that 4 weeks, and we're going to scale it. We're going to say that 4 weeks is actually an hour. So rather than making the players play the game for, like, an entire week before they die of hunger, it's a constant struggle to find food. It's a constant struggle to stay warm. And being injured is something that it affects the player massively. It just affects you so much when you become injured in that game. And calories are actually something the game looks at, so when you run low on calories, you'll start to lose energy and you won't be able to function as well. There's a lot of really small things that I've always wanted to see in a survival game happening in The Long Dark, and it makes it to be a very interesting experience, one that I think is definitely worth watching if you're interested in these types of games. And of course, the idea that they're going to have this sort of season-based story mode as well is very interesting to me, and I think it's nice to see them sort of stepping back from the multiplayer portion of it and saying, how can we craft the sort of dynamic experience for an individual player that is heavily focused on these survival elements, and then throw a really great story and moral decision making into it. It seems to be very promising, and I'm looking forward to it very much, so I definitely recommend that you guys check it out. I'll have the website linked below, as well as Scott Manley's Let's Play. Go watch them both, and then come back here. Let me know what you think about The Long Dark, and also, of course, let me know what you think about the current state of survival games. I'll see you in the next one.